Maintaining Thyroid Healthy Balance. How are you? Megan Taslaman here tonight. The topic primarily tonight, we're really delving into, stubborn weight loss and Hashimoto slash hypothyroidism. And I'm going to nut out some definitions and also some things that I'm seeing, people coming into my world and I see that they're completely being mismanaged. So I'm just going to flag those elements to you as well. So if you're coming on in, say hello. I'm just going to wait for Facebook to catch up and I'm just going to check to see if I am in fact live, going out into the ethers of Facebook world, which we love. I have a love-hate relationship with our Facebook. All right, so I am live. Fantastic. Beautiful. And Shell, my amazing VA, is here. She's tagging you all. When you come on in, let me know that you're here. Say hello. Let's get this interactive and let's get this firing. And if you're coming in on the replays, certainly just give me a, hashtag replay or recording, drop it in the comments now, just so that I can tell who's watched this and, should I be helping you in the future, I'll be better placed to answer your questions knowing that you've watched this live training. Also the relevance that it has for you in your world because, Hashimoto's, there are so many different signs and symptoms. One of them is inability to lose weight or stubborn weight or, poor metabolism. And that's the topic that I'm mainly going to go through tonight because guess what? It's not all down to the thyroid. Even though Hashimoto's gives you an inkling that it's a thyroid issue. Let's just reframe that. I actually disagree with that definition completely. And let me get on with it. Alrighty, so let's start with the overarching title. Why weight loss feels impossible with Hashimoto's and understanding the real drivers behind, our inability to lose weight and certainly what can tip on into the thyroid world and create impact to our thyroid hormones. So in this session, here's what I'm going to explore. First of all, we're going to be here for about 30 minutes, okay? Try not to keep you people too long. And I'm going to be exploring the real difference between Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. Okay, why autoimmune activity and thyroid hormone function are not the same thing. Why some people struggle to lose weight even when the labs appear normal. Okay, irrespective of their diagnosis, whether it be Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's with hypothyroidism, hypothyroidism without Hashimoto's. Like there are so many different scenarios and they mean different things in your body. Right? Hidden physiological drivers that sabotage weight loss in Hashimoto's, people with Hashimoto's, and how I'm particularly going to be talking about how through my 4 pillars for thyroid healing, we can help to influence your metabolism and body composition. All right. So how does that sound, everyone? Give me a yes, give me a wave, give me a thumbs up. Are you here? Are you ready? Are you ready to shed some light on what's going on to, find out what's going on in your body? Let's get interactive. I know that a few people are watching, but I can't see very much coming on in the comments. Let me just refresh my screen. All righty. Okay. So if you're watching the replay later on, if you can't be here on the live, that's totally fine. That's why we actually have the recording function, all right, so that you can actually watch it. So that's absolutely fine. Alrighty, so let me just start, whether you're here live or watching the replay, with this question. How many of you feel like you're doing all of the right things, right? As much as what you know what to do for your body. You're watching what you eat, you're trying to exercise, you're trying to move each day, you're hydrating, but the weight just won't shift. And maybe it's actually coming on even more. So just drop a me in the comments. Drop a me. I mean, certainly this has been me in the past. right? So I totally get what this can feel like, all right? Here's the thing, most people with Hashimoto's are told the reason is simple. That tonight I'm gonna show you why the explanation is very incomplete. Hashimoto's is not primarily a thyroid disorder. I mean, a lot of people know that, but also a lot of people don't know that. It's actually an immune disorder which may impact the thyroid if left unchecked down the track, causing hypothyroidism. Okay? It doesn't automatically pigeonhole you to have hypothyroidism. Like Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism are not the same thing. Right? Hashimoto's is very much a dysfunction of the immune system, which may down the track, if left unmanaged, affect the thyroid gland. That's the key difference. Hypothyroidism, on the other hand, is either the end result of unmanaged Hashimoto's that has then gone on to destroy the thyrocytes, the thyroid cells, the thyroglobulin, hence the autoantibodies, antithyroglobulin, antithyroid peroxidase. Once those systems are destroyed, that can then lead into hypothyroidism. Or it may actually be strictly an endocrine disorder, which means it's hypothyroidism, not Hashimoto's. Okay, so there's a few different scenarios, and it's really, really important to understand which one is you, which is why I'm a huge fan of doing full panel thyroid testing and also functional testing as well. Because if you don't really know what is actually going on in the beginning, it's going to be difficult to find where to look. So if you've got stubborn weight that's not coming off, as an example, or you've got weight issues, it's really important for you to understand if it is strictly endocrine, hence hypothyroidism, or if it's stemming from Hashimoto's, because that's definitely going to give us an inkling as to the root cause, because we look in a different direction for Hashimoto's, completely different direction, because we're looking via the immune system and what dysregulates the immune system, as opposed to what dysregulates the endocrine system. Does that make sense? Let me know. Oh, hey, Sophia. So beautiful to see you. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so it's really it's an interesting scenario, and even though, we kind of put it all in together as like a thyroid dysfunction and a thyroid disorder, and clearly I'm the thyroid naturopath and I treat all, so it's in that kind of box, it's actually very different. And it's really important to understand what's actually going on. So, the labs tell us so much more. Like, clearly, I don't dispense medication, so I'm not about to tweak medication. I can give, I can give my opinion on it, depending on who I'm speaking with. However, it's not about tweaking the medication. I mean, that's actually the way the biomedical model treat the dis-ease, is to tweak the medication. But you know what? There is so much more we can do, which is why I'm here and delivering this live training tonight. Okay, so here is a recent study, 2026. I love it when a brand new study comes out. I get quite excited. Now, this is actually debunking some information that is in a major text, a major naturopathic text that I had back in 2015, or even earlier, 2012. These authors are amazing. I'm not going to actually mention it because it might, this is just an understanding of, how science catches up. And it can be really interesting because sometimes when you have like an inkling of the way something, there's just a mismatch, and then suddenly the science catches up. Like, your gut intuition is actually in front of the science. I'm just telling you that now, right? Whether you want to believe it or not, your gut intuition is in front of the science. So feel into your body, right? That's one of the pillars, right? I'm not going to go into that right now, okay? So here's the study. The study name is Thyroid Hormone Displacement Dose is not associated with anti-TPO, that's anti-thyroid peroxidase, and anti-TG, and which is anti-thyroglobulin antibody. Teeters in Hashimoto's disease. Okay, so that is the name of the study. And it was really, really interesting because in this study they tested 70 women. So, it's not a big global study, but it's a sizable population. Okay, so here are the key stats from the study. These are the average values amongst the participants. So the average body weight was around 71 kilos, 71.5 kilos. The average body fat was around 35%, which is quite high. The average anti-thyroid peroxidase autoantibodies were 232 IU per mil. The average anti-thyroglobulin antibodies were 335 IU per mil. So this is kind of typical numbers that I will see. They aren't sky high, they're not low. There's an issue, we need to red flag it. There's a trend potentially. Now, the participants were then divided into 3 groups. They were all on levothyroxine. Okay, so they were all on medication, right? So this is Hashimoto's, right? The 3 groups were under 50 microunits per day, 50 to 100 microunits per day, and over 100 micrograms, I beg your pardon, micrograms per day. So here are the major findings. So the researchers found no correlation between levothyroxine dose and body weight, body fat percentage, anti-thyroid peroxidase autoantibodies, and anti-thyroglobulin autoantibodies. Meaning that increasing the thyroid hormone did not change the body composition and it did not regulate the autoimmune process. Let me say that again. Increasing the thyroid hormone, so the synthetic thyroid hormone, did not change body composition and did not regulate autoimmune process. So the conclusions of the study were that immune regulation in Hashimoto's exists outside the scope of hormonal regulation, right? So I found this really interesting because a lot of people will go to the GP and depending on their signs and symptoms, they're like in terms of body weight, the actual, or, also fatigue as well is another big one. The dose of the thyroxine will change. It's often also changed depending on where it sits on that particular time that the blood test was taken, right? So where is it on the panel? Okay, which I feel is very, very surface level and it's not really looking at the big picture, which is why, a lot of clients, when they come to me, it's like, we've been tweaking this medication for 10, 15 years and I still feel rubbish. I still have all of these signs and symptoms, right? So this is a really interesting finding, not to mention the side effects with these types of medications. So if the immune system is the driving condition and the thyroid hormones are only replacing what the thyroid produces, then the bigger question becomes, what else is influencing the body's metabolism? All right, well, there's so many things. This is why when we have signs and symptoms of thyroid, and then the thyroid's a bit labored or there's autoantibodies, suddenly it's like, okay, let's give you levothyroxine. And then there's no wonder that the symptoms don't resolve. And another beef in my bonnet is that often the client is told that they need to stay on this medication forever. And that's actually the holy grail. And it's so untrue. You can come off medication. Absolutely. If you've got very well supported systems and you understand what the drivers are and you've established strong foundations in those base layers, you absolutely, as long as you've got a fully functioning thyroid, you absolutely can come off that medication. The problem is the longer that you're on it, the more difficult it becomes because what happens is our body gets used to something, gets used to a prop, and then the systems kind of shut down. They down regulate. All right, so ask any questions. Let me know if this is resonating. Is this landing for you? So this is a brand new clinical trial, by the way. Okay, now, whenever there's a brand new clinical trial, what often follows is more clinical trials. Basically, this doesn't mean that, oh, this is the gold standard. This is just, we all do this now. But what it means is generally other researchers follow, and when there's enough data, that generally forms like a gold standard, which is like a systematic review, and which is when they correlate several clinical trials, and then from that get stats. Okay, so but this is just paving the way, and I'm really excited about this finding, to be honest, because it backs up what I've thought all along. Okay, so where am I? Okay, so what else is influencing the body's metabolism? Well, so many things, right? And if left unchecked, that can then impact the thyroid hormones, or it can be an underlying factor all along. All right? Everything's connected, the body's connected. So, this is where my four pillars for thyroid wellness come in. Because if we're only looking at the thyroid and manipulating what's going on with the thyroid hormones, expecting that to do the heavy lifting on our weight management, on our shifts in metabolism, and on all of our signs and symptoms, well, to be frank, we're missing the point. All right? Because it's not up to the pill. Okay? It's not up to that. What actually created the dysfunction in the first place? So that's when we can reverse engineer and go, okay, well, there's a problem here. Let's look back, which is why I'm a big fan of looking at your health story and seeing where the peaks are, with lots of things, stress, dysregulation of blood sugar, inflammation, major trauma incidents in your life, major, hormonal transition issues like perimenopause, pregnancy. Did you have postpartum thyroiditis, as an example? That will mean that you've got a higher risk of this occurring later on in life with perimenopause. All of these are really key factors to consider. Okay, so first, I'm just going to clarify the difference between Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. All right, so firstly, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition. It's an immune system attack on the thyroid tissue. The markers commonly seen in this are anti-thyroid peroxidase, autoantibodies, anti-thyroglobulin, autoantibodies, and inflammatory infiltration of lymphocytes into the thyroid gland. Typically this person is highly sensitive. Typically there is root causes that may lend themselves to multiple autoimmune conditions, stemming primarily from gut, stress, hormone, environmental toxins is huge, huge with Hashimoto's, right? And on the rise, okay? And that will all stem from, your potential genetic tendency as well. I just had my DNA Life done the other day, which is a DNA test. It's not going to tell me whether I have a condition, but it's going to tell me when I was born, the genes that I was born with, what my tendencies are. And it was really, really interesting. I'm just going to share. One of the things which really took me by surprise is I have the gene which is which could easily create celiac disease, right? I have the gene. Now, I find this really interesting because Hashimoto's and celiac kind of go hand in hand. Now, I'm predominantly gluten-free. I mean, it sneaks in here and there, but I am predominantly gluten-free. And knowing this now, had I not been gluten-free all the time, I'm sure that I would have transglutaminase, markers and I would have all the markers for celiac disease and most likely have major gut issues. Okay? But I've actually been gluten-free and predominantly gluten-free for well and truly before my thyroid diagnosis, just because I knew that it did not sit well with me. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is because, our genes load the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger. Lucky for me, I didn't have too much of an environment that would pull the trigger on that gene dysfunction that I was born with. So, point being is, like, I'm not telling everyone to go out and get a DNA test. And by the way, I'm not talking about the ancestral DNA. Don't touch that, in my opinion. I'm talking about a clinically relevant DNA panel, which is easily read, that is actually protected as well, because, information leaks everywhere these days. I just find it really interesting. Anyway, if you're interested in learning more about that, just type DNA and I can share the details with you. That's free for anyone to order. And yeah, I can help you with that. I wasn't going to be talking about that tonight, but it just seemed to come up because I just literally got my report and I found it really super interesting. All right, so let me get back on track. Okay, so that's Hashimoto's, right? Hypothyroidism is a dysfunction of the endocrine gland and sorry, the endocrine system. Okay, dysfunction of the thyroid gland within the endocrine system. And the precursor may be Hashimoto's. So this is why if you have Hashimoto's but not hypothyroidism, seriously, you have a golden opportunity, an absolute golden opportunity to turn that ship around. Which is huge because it can take 10 years to manifest as hypothyroidism. Right? So hypothyroidism is a hormonal condition. The markers are elevated TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, reduced free T4 and reduced T3, and typically the ratios are out as well. We really want the T4 to T3 to be a 3-to-1 ratio. So go get out your blood test results, have a look. Is it a 3-to-1? But if your T4 is sitting low, your T3 is most likely still low because obviously the 3-to-1 ratio is on the low side. All right. Alrighty, so you can also have, so I think I've mentioned the three major scenarios: Hashimoto's without hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's with hypothyroidism, and hypothyroidism without autoimmunity. Depending on which you've got, it's going to influence where to look in terms of supporting your major symptom, which tonight we're talking about is inability to lose weight. All right, Jennifer, yeah, absolutely, I'll get that to you. Wonderful. Alrighty. Okay, where am I? Lovely to see you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here. Okay, alrighty, so weight resistance is usually influenced by multiple systems interacting together. Okay, it's not just about the thyroid. All right, a clear sign of underactive thyroid is inability to lose weight or weight gain in a very short period of time. But a lot of people who come into my world, they've had slow metabolism for a long time. Okay, not a short period of time. And Hashimoto's and maybe sluggish thyroid, but not hypothyroidism. That's probably the typical scenario of the person coming in. And many of these people are actually on thyroxine and maybe potentially don't need to be. All right, that's another thing as well. Yeah, lovely to see you too, Jennifer. I can't actually see you, but I can see your comments. All righty. Okay, let me get into it. Okay, so let me just talk about the 4 pillars for thyroid wellness. So this is the way that I believe is the best way to address stubborn issues like inability to lose weight and to improve your metabolic rate. Okay, so the 4 pillars to thyroid wellness. The first pillar is the physical driver. Okay, so physical drivers stem from everything, but tonight I'm mainly going to be talking about the biological physical drivers. So those things where we really need testing to nut it out to see what's going on. Okay, so this is where most people, this is where we focus first because it's kind of like it's physical, it's in black and white. We can see what's going on, and it's typically it gives us clear direction quickly. All right. So the physiological factors that influence weight resistance, like the big one is blood sugar dysregulation. Okay, so blood sugar dysregulation. Like certainly a couple of my clients have suspected thyroid issues, but really the big driver is blood sugar and insulin resistance. All right, that's actually the biggest driver. So the big markers are elevated fasting insulin, insulin resistance, HbA1c shifts, high blood glucose. There also may be inflammatory markers like high CRP, maybe even ESR. These are inflammatory markers that you can have done. Also, typically another one I see is in the lipid panel on your pathology report, there'll be high triglycerides. That tells me that there's a blood sugar issue and insulin resistance as well. All right. There could also be a high anion gap, just meaning that there's tissue acidity. So there's a couple of things that kind of marry, which will tell me that this is a major physical driver. Now, this is commonly linked with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And it's really interesting because the thyroid autoantibodies, guess what? They also affect the pancreas. They also can affect other endocrine glands. Even though they are called thyroid autoantibody, it doesn't mean that they are only affecting the thyroid gland, right? So that's super interesting as well. I mean, they can be elevated when there's other issues going on. All right, so okay, so the impact on blood sugar, so it promotes fat storage and metabolic slowdown clearly. Signs and symptoms which are very similar to hypothyroidism, like brain fog, like the highs and lows with sugar fluctuations, weight gain, fatigue, especially after eating, and it skews with the leptin and ghrelin signaling, which are your satiety and appetite hormones. And that's often because of what happens with the fat storage without getting too techie here. Alrighty, so the next, another physical driver is gut and microbiome dysfunction, which is very common with Hashimoto's. So the main indicators here are dysbiosis, which basically means imbalance of microbes in your microbiome, reduced microbiome, can't say that word, microbial diversity, so reduced microbial diversity, and intestinal inflammation. That may also be classified as leaky gut. That is very typical with Hashimoto's, very, very typical, and Graves' disease, in fact, both of those. Any autoimmune, I'm yet to see there be a major link with gut. It's why working with the gut is, and bringing that back online is one of the first things to look at. I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, it really depends what the big driver is, but it's typically a huge driver. So the impact on the body is poor nutrient absorption. Okay, so there could be food inflammation or food allergy, which is activating the immune system, which is then triggering the autoantibodies. Okay, I'm not going to go right into the pathophysiology. I've done that on another live training. If you're wanting to understand how like food particles can impact the thyroid autoantibodies, it was not that long ago that I did a training on the 5 ways that gluten can impact the thyroid gland. If you're wanting a copy of that, just type 5 ways gluten and we will send that training across to you. I think I did that in January, not too long ago now. Alrighty, so this next one, this is huge. And so toxin load and heavy metals. Honestly, there is a plethora of environmental toxins on this planet. It is huge. So many different elements that can impact the thyroid gland. And, when we do tissue testing, often I'm surprised, like things come up, like weird things like bismuth, bismuth and, yeah, lots of kind of unusual elements that aren't supposed to be sky high, but they are. And how are they getting in? Well, that's where we need to do some detective work. The typical heavy metal, which definitely impacts Hashimoto's, is mercury. All right, so watch your large predator fish. And some people are just susceptible to holding on to mercury more than others. That's me. So I love fish, but I need to be careful because my body just latches onto that mercury. So again, that comes down to your genes. Do you have a tendency here or not? So there are so many factors to consider. And, toxin load in heavy metals like impact of glyphosate, all of those are endocrine disruptors. So they can impact things like your leptin and your ghrelin, like your hunger and your satiety signals. They can impact your ability to lose weight. In fact, the fat stored on your body is probably protecting your vital organs because it's actually storing the heavy metals and storing the pesticides and toxins, because potentially your liver is not functioning well, so the body's not going to release that into the bloodstream, because if the liver can't mop it up and clean it up really, really quickly, the body's just going to hold on and conserve. All right, just reading this. Yeah. Okay. So, agricultural chemicals, the impact is huge on mitochondrial dysfunction. So the mitochondria is like the ever-ready battery within your cell. It helps your body create energy. It is like the energy driver. So, these toxins can impact this, also causing disruption to hormones. Especially problematic if you're going through other hormonal transitions like perimenopause. And it can also stimulate your immune system, so worsening your autoimmune issue. So it's really important to address this. Mold is another huge one, very huge contender. And all of these play their role in impacting your body and its ability to lose weight, right? Because at the end of the day, the body's on your side and it's trying to keep you safe, right? That's always the order of things. Right, so the next thing, actually, before I move on, if anyone is interested in doing a little bit of a read on the impact of environmental toxins on the thyroid gland, just type blog in the comments. It was several years ago now. I went to a 3-day seminar and picked up so much information. I think it was way back in 2017 from memory. And I wrote a blog on it. It still stands up. It's still true. If anything, there are so many more environmental toxins now than what there was back then. And you're going to get a lot of tips into some lifestyle factors that you can actually put into place now to help reduce your environmental toxin load. Because when we're working with environmental toxins, it's not an overnight fix. And honestly, it can be overwhelming if you're just kind of like throwing everything out. It can really be overwhelming. So my recommendation is, just start with one cupboard, or start with one room, or start with one system, start with one element, and just go through, because honestly, it is worth it, because this is a lifestyle dis-ease. All right. So if you're making significant changes to the way in which you do life through your consumption of products and the way, even where you live, like location, etc., it can really influence your decision making for later on and help set you up for good health or better health later on, irrespective of what else you do. All right. So just type blog and I'll get that to you. Okay, so hormonal shifts. Actually, we're going over 30 minutes. I'll try to wrap this up soon. I've still got some important points to go through. Let me know if you're finding this interesting, by the way. Just type interesting. It's really important for me to get some feedback here. Okay. Perimenopause and menopause. This is typically a transition time where the thyroid can misbehave, including Hashimoto's without hypothyroidism, okay, because of the impact through the immune system, because of our, changes in estrogen, progesterone, and our cortisol rhythms, and the effects on insulin sensitivity, fat redistribution, and metabolic slowing, all right? Mineral imbalances, another huge one, influences our metabolic rate depending on what our main electrolytes are. And this is the minerals that we find in tissue, our calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium as an example. And it also helps us through these ratios, it helps us to highlight adrenal dysfunction, liver dysfunction, blood sugar irregularities, heavy metals, electrolyte ratio imbalances, etc. So I've just kind of like lent into a functional testing that I love to do because it gives me so much information. Okay, so thanks, Jennifer. Oh, great. Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Sophia. Great. It's always good to get this feedback. Thank you. All right, so let's move into pillar two. So pillar two are the mental drivers. So the brain plays a powerful role in our metabolism, more than what we think. All right, so chronic stress definitely alters our neurochemistry, and possible markers and influences are low dopamine. So low dopamine is associated with reduced motivation, emotional eating, and reward-seeking behavior. So if you've got low dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, because of underlying root causes, you've got low dopamine, it's going to be very difficult for you to put into place dietary and lifestyle factors to help you shift through because the neurotransmitter isn't there. Okay? So this is where, willpower, like it's seriously when people just say, oh, I just have that willpower, like there's so much more to it than willpower. Like if you're bottomed out in dopamine, it's going to be a real struggle for you to move ahead. So, I find it really interesting because the backbone to your thyroid hormone and the backbone to your dopamine is the amino acid tyrosine, right? How interesting is that? You know? And a lot of people with thyroid challenges, okay, sluggish thyroid, subclinical thyroid, or hypothyroidism, so I'm talking about the endocrine here now, have low dopamine, so I find this really interesting. The other one is serotonin dysregulation. So serotonin dysregulation is associated with, cravings for carbohydrates, right? So it's going to be difficult to shift weight if there is a known factor and you're craving for carbohydrate. So if you're listening to your body and you're trying to give your body what it needs, it could be skewed by something going on with your neurotransmitters, right? Mood instability and sleep disturbance are two others. Okay, so this can all be nutted out through functional testing, and then we can see what vitamins and minerals we need to help bring those neurotransmitters back online. Definitely got low dopamine, yeah. Yep, I hear you, Jennifer. I hear you, absolutely. All right, so when the brain perceives stress, metabolism shifts into conservation mode. Okay, so yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of like the primal instinct, we conserve. So it can be really, really difficult. And this is also an explanation as to why sometimes your T4 that converts into T3, sometimes it can shoot down that other pathway and go into reverse T3 because if there's a constant stress driver, right? And this is also going to be impacting your dopamine and your serotonin levels, right, through various ways. So T3 is going to be shooting down to reverse T3, which basically is your body being on your side, is trying to put the brakes on your system so that you slow down because guess what? You're not listening. You're soldiering on. You're still doing the thing that's caused the issue in the first place. You still have the environmental toxins that are causing the issue in the first place. You're still eating the food that's causing the issue in the first place. Okay? There is a multitude of things that are impacting. It's about fact finding, so reverse engineering from what your blood tests show. All right? All right, pillar 3, emotional drivers. The emotional terrain influence the nervous system. Absolutely, it does. Common patterns seen clinically are long-term caregiving roles, places a significant amount of stress on the body and on the nervous system and on your endocrine system and on your immune system long-term. So suppressed emotional expression absolutely gets locked and trapped in tissue. Chronic overwhelm and anxiety, trauma patterns, these influence nervous system tone, cortisol patterning. Like the body's clever, it will try to adapt. It will try to adapt, but it doesn't mean that you're okay. All right? It's like your body's going to war each day. Okay? Also, inflammatory signaling. All right, so typically low-grade chronic inflammation. So when the body remains in a prolonged survival state, weight release becomes very difficult. All right. So the reason why I'm bringing up all of these scenarios is for you to pinpoint what may be true for you, because it's going to then give you a clue where to look. Okay, so we reverse engineer to see where to look. Okay, so rather than looking for the next shiny object and the next treatment plan, the next supplement, where's that supplement that's going to make me feel better? The long way is actually the short way in the end. The long way is the short way. Supplements can help us get from A to B. Absolutely, they can help heal major issues and dysfunction. But the long way, which is delving down into those deeper layers, which often from the point of view of the emotional pillar, you may not wish to visit, this is what's actually going to bring healing. And is it going to be overnight? No, it might be for several years, depending on the capacity at which it's caused impact. However, it is absolutely worth it, because this is the journey of life, to live your best life. All right? That's my belief. Okay, so the pillar 4 is spiritual drivers. Okay, now here I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about your belief system. It is private and unique to you. I'm talking about spiritual drivers in the context of this pillar relating to your alignment and identity. Okay, so if there's a mismatch, that can create friction and stress in your body. So clinically, it's living out of alignment with purpose. Okay, so chronic self-sacrifice is another one. Lack of personal boundaries, right? Disconnection from your inner voice. You think thyroid, fifth chakra, seat of expression, voice. Why does it sit here in this energy zone? Okay. So that's where I feel that this pillar 4, the spiritual driver, is really, really interesting and worth taking a look through. Okay, so we've got the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual drivers. So these make up the 4 pillars for thyroid wellness. If we're only looking at the physical, we're missing out on many other possible root causes. So we need to look through the lens of all of these, hence working holistically. And for some people, it would be focusing more on one pillar at that particular time, and maybe for the whole time, not so much on another. Okay, does that make sense? Let me know if the 4 pillars make sense. So this is why weight struggles and Hashimoto's are rarely solved by focusing on one factor. So we don't focus on calories, we don't focus on thyroid hormones alone. We're not only focusing on exercise. Weight resistance is often the end result of multiple systems interacting together. Otherwise, it would be super easy to just shift that weight, wouldn't it? Okay? So when those systems begin to rebalance, immune regulation improves, inflammation decreases, and metabolic flexibility returns. Right? So not in that order. And it's going to be more for some people than other people. Okay, but these are examples of what we bring back online. So which pillar do you resonate most with tonight? I'd love you to just pop it in the chat here. Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Yeah, I know you totally get it. Yeah, absolutely. Putting it all together, Jennifer. We don't want to just look through one lens. We need to really focus on everything. And, biomedical model only looks at the physical, rarely looks at any of the other pillars. So I feel that that's a real Yeah, it's a real missing piece actually in healthcare. So, yeah, which pillar do you resonate with the most? It could be all of them. It could be two more than the other two. So the physical, mental, like mindset, what's going on upstairs, emotional, and spiritual. And sometimes you don't actually know until you do the work, and then you realize, oh wow, this is actually a big factor in my life. This is actually a huge sabotaging factor in my life, but you don't know until you know, right? Or you think you know it all until you do the work, and then you see that actually this is an area I need to look at and spend a bit more time in. Beautiful, Jennifer. All of them resonate. Me too. Yeah, it's actually a good thing. Like, don't be sad. It's actually a really good thing. Yeah, because and we don't want to be overwhelmed with this. We don't want to be thinking, oh, where do I start? It's actually looking at we look at physical first. Okay, we look at the obvious first. And then we look through to that main problem through the other pillars because they can become the sabotaging factors to your success. All right, so weight loss is just one element. There are many signs and symptoms, but if we're looking through that pillar of, say, for example, emotional well-being, you may then see that, okay, a sabotaging factor is low serotonin and craving of carbohydrates, overeating, all right, or a lack of joy in your life. So you're needing some comfort. That's another example of an emotional driver. All right, so if you know someone with Hashimoto struggling with weight, of course, I'd love you to share this training with them. And how do you do that? Simple. You just invite them into the group. So just share the group link with them or ask for it from me and we'll share it to them and they can come on in and watch this live training. And just to mention now that if you're wishing to explore these deeper drivers and understand what your body is responding to, this is exactly the work we do inside my thyroid restoration roadmap. Okay, this is exactly what we do. All right. Now, not everyone is going to have a weight issue. You know, most people have a fatigue issue. Some people have more gut issues. Other people, it's inflammation, right? So depending on what it is, there is a root cause or root causes, and the way we work with that isn't just to supplement, isn't just diet. It is actually looking through and delving into these four layers. Okay, so that's actually how we work. All right, it's one element. There are many elements, okay? It's very holistic. So the thyroid restoration roadmap includes functional testing, personalized strategy, and deeper root cause exploration. So if you're ready to go deeper and you would like to have a conversation around what it would look like in working with us in the thyroid restoration roadmap, just type discovery call and we will send you a link and set up a call. It'll be about a 45-minute call where I'll find out, what the main drivers are for your thyroid issue, whether it be Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, whether your main issue is weight or not. It could be fatigue, whatever it is that you're trying to get hold of. And I'll be able to map out a plan in terms of what functional testing we would do and how we would work together across the period of time. So if you're actually wanting to get to a deeper layer, yeah, just type discovery call. So to close, your body is not broken. It is responding intelligently to the signals. Okay, it is always on your side. And if it feels like it's offside at the moment, it's just because it needs more support. Okay, it needs more support. Okay, when we understand the signals, everything can begin to shift. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this live training. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again. in 2 weeks' time, we will have a brand new topic. And yeah, Jennifer, fantastic. We'll send a link out to you and we'll set up that call. Beautiful. Yeah, Sophie is just commenting that she believes that all of these pillars are playing a role for you. Absolutely, Sophia. And it's kind of, it's all of us, right? It's just about really focusing on what to look at prominently at this point in time and to really heal the base layer with that before we move on to the next. All right, that's it from me, and I will see you next time. Have a beautiful evening. Bye for now. Bye.